Hi, everybody, and welcome to Impact Matters. This is our 10th edition, and we've been going for about a year now. And we are a webcast with cutting edge thinkers and change agents on the topic of impact. I'm Amy Hall, founder and president of Impactorum, an advisory service for sustainability and CSR professionals. And with me is Anela Dujsic, my co-host for today's conversation. Anela joins us from Toronto, where she's been working on her social enterprise, Considerate Goods, and she recently completed her MBA from the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Business. But I actually know Anela from her days as an account executive at Eileen Fisher's Toronto showroom, which we don't have anymore. And we first met at the WEAR conference, the World Ethical Apparel Roundtable in Toronto some years back. So, and Anela also helped me with my, my fledgling business Impactorum. So it's really fun to have her join me on screen for this webcast. Welcome, Anela.
Thank you, Amy. So excited to be here.
And before we start, I just want to introduce Sienna Spitzer, who will point out a few features of the Zoom platform and the chat room.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sienna, and I'll be here today helping manage the Q&A and the chat. Before we get started, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Along the bottom of your screen, you should see both a chat and a Q&A function. If you want to submit a question at any point, please do so using the Q&A, and we'll save about 15 minutes at the end of the session to answer as many questions as we can live. Otherwise, feel free to connect with everyone on the webcast using the chat function throughout the session. We always love to see everyone engaging and connecting. And one super important thing to note about the chat is right now the default setting for your chat is set to send your message to all panelists only. So you'll need to change this to set it to all panelists and attendees to make sure your message is visible to everyone. You'll see the option to toggle this all panelists and attendees directly above your chat box. All right, that's it for me. Enjoy the session, and I'll catch up with you at the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Sienna. And now, Anela, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to introduce today's guests.
Thank you, Amy. I am actually super thrilled to introduce today's guests. So when I think about how I met Dihan and Erin, I think so much about how it connects to what we talk about so often in our careers with impact sessions, which is really just reaching out and connecting with the communities that you're inspired by and interested in, because often it can lead to wonderful things, and it definitely did in this case. So I tried my first spent goods sourdough bread, and I basically fell in love. It was so good that like I can eat an entire loaf in a day or two good, which is kind of problematic. But in addition to being so good, I was blown away with the idea that it was made from spent grains, or using spent grains from the brewing process. And I was so like energized by this whole idea that I had to actually just reach out to them and tell them how amazing I thought what they were doing was. And so I literally did just that. I sent them a message on Instagram saying, "You guys are awesome. I love this." And I was really interested in like learning more. And so I asked, like, would you be open to having a virtual coffee chat? Because I just would love to know more. And lucky for me, Dihan, the founder, actually happened to see my message, and he was totally down to chat. So we had this awesome chat that it ended up in us realizing that we lived fairly close to each other and doing a socially distant trade of what's it called? A pretzel bagel, which is my other favorite product of theirs, and a copy of my Patagonia Let My People Go Surfing book. And so we did this trade, and it kind of kicked off this awesome like friendship, and for me, mentorship in a lot of ways. Dihan, in addition to spent goods, has a background in launching other awesome sustainable businesses, and is just a wealth of entrepreneurial knowledge. And he was such a support for me as I was in the process of launching my little small business, Considerate Goods. And so the connecting goodness sort of continued there, because knowing my interest in sustainable and circular apparel, Dihan actually suggested I connect with Erin at Impact Zero. So Erin, being this ever incredible source of source and sharer of knowledge on all things circular economy, was actually working on a case study, a circular case study to share with her Impact Zero community. And the study was on Eileen Fisher's, coincidentally, circular clothing take back and resale model called Renew. And you can actually see it on her website right now. It is published up there along with other really amazing resources on all things circular economy for both individuals and businesses. So I highly suggest you check out her website. I think Sienna will drop it in the chat. And having worked at Eileen Fisher and actually having worked on a project looking at how to scale Renew to Canada, I was more than happy to chat with Erin. And so we had this chat. It was, of course, inspiring. I learned so much more about the awesome work Erin was doing around Impact Zero, just essentially helping like lay out an infrastructure in our city that supports a circular economy. And I also learned about how Erin's previous entrepreneurial experiences actually led her to the need to identify the need for this type of organization, which I think is really cool. I'm pumped for you guys to hear more about that, because I think it's so cool about how our past experiences inform and let us see other needs and opportunities for impact, basically. And Erin was also in the process of transitioning from her day job to doing Impact Zero full time, which was also so exciting. And she's been a huge supporter of me and Considerate Goods, and I have just loved supporting her back and seeing the amazing growth that she has had with Impact Zero. And so to conclude my intro, what I think I'm saying is Erin and Dihan are amazing, and reaching out and connecting like led to this wonderful web of inspiration and support. And now we're going to merge all of that with my passion and work for Impactorum. And you guys are going to get to hear some amazing stories, amazing stories about the inspiring journeys that Dihan and Erin have. So yeah, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Anela. That was an awesome introduction. And I love how you pointed out the connections that you made with each of them sequentially, and the importance of networking and the importance of reaching out so that we can continue to expand our networks, and you never know what kind of magical opportunities and friendships might come from that. So Erin and Dihan, welcome to Impact Matters. I'm going to bring you on stage now.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yay.
Hi.
So, you know what, just to start off, well, Anela gave you both such rich introductions, but I wonder if we could just take a minute or two each to for you to fill in what maybe Anela didn't already cover about like what your businesses are. And Erin, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So yeah, Impact Zero, we're a nonprofit in Toronto. And just as Anela said, we're basically working with small businesses to try to stand up the infrastructure that the city needs in order for other businesses to participate in the circular economy. And as she mentioned, this was informed by my first experience of trying to start a circular business before I actually knew what circular economy was. But I realized through that experience, like we all really need to collaborate and work together to build the layers that everyone needs to be able to, get the delivery, do the reusable containers and all these fancy things that circular businesses require. So we have a network, we do an accelerator program for businesses that want to start up and basically just help them on that journey to make their circular dreams a reality.
Fantastic, thank you. And Dihan.
Well, I'm actually going to just add to what Erin said. We're just the for-profit version of what Erin is primarily doing. We sort of see ourselves as a connector of different circular economy businesses. They might not necessarily be getting into a partnership based on circular economy philosophy, but we're essentially the glue that connects different businesses. And how we do this is sort of focusing right now. Spent Goods focuses as a food transformer. Specifically, we work with viable food byproducts that are typically discarded, and we take that and we transform it into value. So we started off with working with barley grains that breweries typically use to make beer. But another example of a viable food byproduct might be the tomatoes that farmers will grow, but they're not considered as perfect and suitable for a grocery store. They're also referred to as imperfect tomatoes. So these different products, we try to identify them, divert them away from landfill, and just sort of turn it into something else that can be used and still have another life. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so with the barley as an example, it's one of those things that after it's gone through the brewing process, it still has high fiber and high protein, and it's a little less sugar. So instead of discarding these resources that are very much available in urban spaces, why not just sort of use it to actually feed people locally? And that's fundamentally what our mission is with Spent Goods.
Thank you. Anela, maybe you want to go next.
Yeah, so we really love a kind of recurring topic on our Impact Matters sessions is really this like idea of windy paths and how, you know, people have done all these other things that have led them to what they're doing. And so we'd love if you guys could share a little bit more about your paths before your business, whether it's previous businesses or your previous day jobs and all that stuff, and how it sort of led to where you are now.
Dihan, you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, so yeah, my origin story actually starts with, I dare say, poo. It's one of those things where, if I start again, actually, it's more to do with, I wanted to sort of start an animal sanctuary. And it was one of those things that I am not independently wealthy enough to sort of fundraise and sort of maintain a sanctuary, which is typically the business model. And so I just wanted to see, is there a way in which I could potentially use the poo that would rise from a sanctuary and use that as a way to sort of generate biofuel? And so I started Googling, and luckily I came across the Toronto Zoo actually has a project where they actually collect the poo of their animals, and they've set up a biodigester, and they're in the process of making bioenergy from it. So I wanted to learn more about, you know, how much poo do I need to collect to sort of pay all these vet bills? And so I just cold called them up, and they were really nice of just getting back, and sort of how Anela was saying, you know, it's just reached out. And so we had a really good conversation, and I remember learning different things like the poo, because it's gone through this digestion process, it actually doesn't have a lot of energy left in it, enough to justify. But you can mix it with undigested organic matter and actually use it to make biofuel, and then it could be a revenue source. But what it fundamentally introduced me to this concept of somebody else's literally waste could be another person's treasure. And I know we've heard it before, but it's just one of those things that the light bulb went off then. And I started to Googling a little bit more, and I came across all these other fascinating people who had a good idea. And they're not necessarily that they were entrepreneurs, but they had an idea and they wanted to try to do something different. And so another great example for me was the Great Ocean Cleanup Project, where it was started by a Danish teenager at the time. And fundamentally, it's this contraption that sits on the ocean, and it uses natural waves energy to sort of collect all the floating plastic that's out there in the ocean. He'd collect it and then basically be able to transform those plastics into biofuel. And then he was selling it. So just that idea of another person's treasures actually can be revenue generating. And so I was looking to see, okay, well, where I was looking for my own treasure, what could that be? And more of a sustainable angle, just because I sort of come from that sort of, I lean a little that way. And so, you know, probably commiserating at my local pub and just talking to everybody about my recent Googling experiences. And, you know, so I just asked that brewery, like, so what do you do about it, you know, in terms of all the stuff that you produce? And they sort of mentioned how, you know, traditionally the spent grains that they collect, which is 80% of their waste, ends up going as animal feed, but they are looking for a lot more sustainable sources. And you have to produce a certain volume for a craft brewery to actually be able to ship it to an animal farm, like especially in urban spaces. you have to transport at least 2 hours. So it's not worth it for somebody to come for like a couple of kilos. You need tons and tons of this. So whereas the majority of the craft breweries, they'll produce maybe about a ton a week in terms of the craft breweries. And nobody will really come pick it up unless you can kind of give them 20 tons. So there's this niche in which majority of the craft brewing industry, they do produce spent grains, but they have limited options in terms of disposing it. So so my origin story is, well, I said, I'd love to help you in this. Do you mind if I Google a bit and sort of come back to you with some ideas? And that's pretty much how the spent goods company started. Sorry.
And it all started with poo. There's a children's book in there somewhere, I think.
There is. Stay tuned.
And prior to this exploration, Dihan, or during this, you had a job in IT, right?
That's right. Yeah. So
and was it during that point, or and another business, right? Yeah.
So I kind of did a traditional sort of corporate job for about 20 years. I used to work for IBM as an IT consultant. Straight out of university, did that for about 20 years. And during the course of working full time, I wanted to do something a bit more about the planet and something a bit more sustainable. And so it gave me the flexibility of starting online businesses, a business called Organic Lifestyle that, sort of focused on products for the home, like pillows, linens, and mattresses that reduces your kind of exposure to more common harsh chemicals at home. So I did that on the side. Initially, we had a physical storefront, and then we moved it online, and that's been running for about 15, 16 years now, and still chugging along. And then, but at the same time, I felt like I wanted to do something more specific to climate change, just because in my own individual daily life of, I recycle and all these different things, but I felt like I was still helpless when you read all the sort of listen to the news or just sort of see these dramatic fluctuations in temperature change. So I was trying to see how can I make a difference on a daily basis, and I was looking for something, and food's a great way in which you can have that impact, where based on your food choices, it directly can result in the your carbon footprint. So yeah, thanks, Anela. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Erin, where are you?
Yeah. So I guess my winding path is quite winding, because on paper, I should not be in the position that I'm on. Like it doesn't make any sense, because so I guess if we go back to kind of where my career started, I'm less than 10 years into my career. I left school 4 years ago, my undergrad. So when I was in university, my degree is in actuarial science, which is math, like not environmental at all. But actually in school, I started working at TD. So I was working at the bank for a number of years, and kind of realized that maybe financial institutions are not my passion. But I had a friend that I was working with at the time who was really getting into zero waste, into like plastic-free living, all of the personal things that we can do to help save the planet. Because while maybe our jobs were not the most environmentally friendly, we were hoping we can kind of offset it by being advocates in our personal lives. So at the time, when I realized that zero waste living was a thing, and like it's really hard to actually participate in, because this was in 2018 when it was getting more popular, but it wasn't as widespread as it is now. I realized there are lots of people who want to live more sustainably, but maybe don't have access to it. They don't have a refill store near them. So that's when I started my first e-commerce website, which was called Hera & Co. And you can imagine it as basically like this virtual refill store. So you'd go online, order a liter of shampoo. I would take the TTC after work with jars and totes to my customers' houses and drop them off, and then go home at the end of the day. And so it was quite a labor-intensive job I gave myself after work. But through that experience, kind of as Anela alluded to at the beginning, this informed a lot of the work that we're doing now, because there are lots of people who want to start businesses in this space. And having done it myself for a year and a half, literally pretty much every single day, taking jars to people's homes, taking empties back, washing them at my warehouse facility, it just became very obvious all of the barriers that existed for people who wanted to start businesses and be sustainable about it, because that's not the traditional way of doing business. So through that very exhausting experience, I completely burnt myself out because I was working full time and only doing this on evenings and weekends. And we had, I think the first year we did like 30,000 in revenue, which is like pretty good for an evenings and weekend thing, but that also means there's a lot of deliveries to be sent out. So I kind of had a moment in the beginning of 2020 that I realized like my position, I think, is more to connect businesses and help find people who can do this together instead of doing it all myself, because no one can do it all themselves. So I really wanted to do that as my job, which is what Impact Zero became. So I shifted over from the for-profit space to the nonprofit space. And now we're connecting businesses and piloting all of these cool, innovative startups. And even in those pilot projects, like connecting companies who can support each other. Like say when I was doing Hair & Co, if I could hire out a washer, and if I could hire out someone who could do the pickups and drop-offs for me, knowing that you need reverse logistics to get things back from customers, like the empty jars, that would have made my life a lot easier. So I'm trying to help other people do that now. And so, as mentioned, like I don't have any degrees or certifications in this. I didn't go to business school. Everything is kind of like jump into it and figure out how to swim. And that's the most fun way to do it, even though it's maybe not the most efficient, but it works. So yeah, that's a little bit about my path.
Erin, I think that it's so interesting that you kind of gave yourself an out, but you're almost making an excuse for having fallen into this line of work because you don't have an MBA or a business degree, whatever. And I think what this illustrates is your creativity and this amazing energy that you have brought to this work, and your kind of grittiness and the grittiness that is required. And we say this at Dihan, that it's a very scrappy life, right? To start a new enterprise in the beginning. And I mean, gosh, all kinds of questions are coming to mind. And by the way, for anybody who has questions, just either start dropping them into the chat or hold on to them for when we open it up to chat. But to the Q&A. Like I think about funding, you both have, one of you is nonprofit, one of you is for-profit. I think about, like what was the very first thing you did there are all kinds of questions that are coming up. So the most important one for me though is I'm a TD Bank customer, and now I'm wondering if TD Bank is a responsible bank. You don't have to answer. We won't go there.
You can research it independently.
I will research it. Thank you. So while we have you highlighted here, Erin, I wondered if you could just talk about, maybe one or two of your most interesting business clients, or the connecting tissue that you've brought together. Because I think that'll help kind of bring to life what your work is all about.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So maybe to give context, because now we have an accelerator. It's called the Impact Project Accelerator. It's 16 weeks, very formalized. We're hosting a gala on July 15th if you want to come and learn from the people who are in that program. But it actually started with a project that Dihan and I collaborated on with a couple other entrepreneurs, because we just like wanted to stand something up to help people share materials, have things not go to waste. So I guess what kind of happened there were lots of people involved. Obviously, there are a lot of barriers when it comes to collaborating with a lot of different people. So what we decided to do with the accelerator is to say, okay, one business that has this systems kind of focus, similar to like Spent Goods would be an example of one that we would work with, because they're helping restaurants and breweries like make that connection. So that's a system that now exists for two companies to participate in a circular economy. But to put it into perspective for kind of like other industries, one of our projects is called CASE. And it's founded by Catherine Merritt. And they are essentially they are revolutionizing the takeout container industry because people have probably seen there are lots of reusable container companies popping up around the city, which are fantastic. However, the one thing I think is really diversified with Case is that she works with companies to essentially reuse the containers that they already are using for takeout. So if you think of black plastic, for example, those can't be recycled in municipal systems. And while they're not necessarily like designed to be reused, they can be reused provided they're washed and sanitized according to public health guidelines. So what she's doing is she is either working with customers to collect black plastic containers from across the city. She has drop boxes in every corner of the city. And then what people can do is either drop it off at her drop sites, or they can partner with a restaurant who is using Case containers. And you can know, wow, when you get the container, it just looks like a normal black plastic container. But what's happening in the background is Case has collected it from customers across the city, washed it, and redistributed it back to restaurants to use. So it's a really easy system to implement because no one's asking restaurants to change their containers. Restaurants are already so crowded, they don't have space to have stacks and stacks of aluminum containers, for example. So this is kind of a good in between until we're ready to transition restaurants into a properly reusable system. So that's one example of a business that's enabling thousands potentially of restaurants across the city to start embracing circular economy and taking responsibility over their plastic waste.
And what is your role in that? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, so she's in our accelerator right now. So she's part of our membership, which is we have like this online portal for businesses to connect and chat. We do trainings for them if they want to learn like technical business stuff, or if they just want to have socials to have better personal relationships between founders, because I think that's something that's potentially lacking in some spaces. So she's one of our formal accelerator projects, which we've been working with them for the past 3 months. And the accelerator is wrapping up on June 18th, but we essentially worked with her to pilot this. So before she came into the accelerator, she didn't have any drop sites or restaurant partners. Like, it was very much still an idea. So now fast forward 3 to 4 months out, she has a proof of concept. She knows her costs. She knows how much money she can make, how much, in Dihan's example, like how many containers she needs to make money, similar to how much poop you need to make money. We've answered like all these questions for her throughout the pilot project. And so where we come in is really like connecting her to those people and being like an accountability partner. We partner them with business executive coaches. So we give them like a ton of resources to make the thing happen that can be really hard and lonely if you're doing it alone by yourself in your bedroom.
Thank you. And hold on, so going back to Dihan for a second here. Tell us a little about maybe an innovation that you're really proud of. When I was looking through your website, you have so many projects that are highlighted. Are you working on all of those all right now? Like, what's the current thing that you're really excited about?
I guess we're a business that has a lot of ideas. It's a matter of, once you have an idea, executing it is something else. So what we try to do is essentially try to work on something that will give us revenue in the short term, just because as a business, we need to generate money in order to pay the bills and all that kind of good stuff. And so that's been our criteria primarily. So for instance, while we're working with spent grain barley to make bread, and we sell that through grocery stores and farmers markets, and that brings in the revenue and allows us to sort of keep the lights on. There are other projects like taking spent grains and you can actually convert it to make it into cardboard. And but to make it into cardboard will require a little research, a couple of years worth of R&D. Even though people have done it on a small scale, the idea is to have the impact, given the amount of spent grains that is available today, requires time and energy that us as a company, we're too small, but we need to find a partner willing to sort of take on this, work with us, and still the revenue stream from that was 2 years out. So I think in terms of innovations, there's a lot of great ideas. We just need to find people that have either time and or energy to, and as well as the financial backing to sort of take on some of these different things. So innovation wise, I think that we're the most excited about is something similar to what Erin and I already originally worked on. Even the idea for spent goods originally was this platform that allows different people who says, hey, I've got things I can give away, I'm not necessarily using. So it could be the spent grains, it could be imperfect apples that somebody else could just say, hey, I'll take those imperfect apples and make apples pies with it. And giving me the visibility of, okay, here are all the people with apples available to be picked up or dropped off within a 5-kilometer radius, right? So this is like the next evolution of anything circular economy. There are some places in more at a government level where they're trying to facilitate these kind of platforms. And so Erin and I did like one version of that. And, I think that's where we would like to sort of get to at some point, but even that requires a bit of funding for developers. And so we're gradually trying to use any of the money and any savings that we have from the business to be able to put towards something along these research and develop this technology platform.
So I was certain, Dihan, that you were going to answer that question about what you're most excited about by saying mushrooms, because I know you have a lot of energy around that. And somehow every time we have a convo, it evolves into what we can do with mushrooms and coffee grounds. But I know you have a lot of things you're excited about.
Yeah, no, she's just so for context, I wanted to, there's somebody else who are doing these things where they're taking spent coffee grinds, using that as a growth medium in addition to spent grains and growing mushrooms at home. So I said, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this ourselves? And then, of course, I Google it and I find a company in Toronto that's doing this today. And so just last week, I think on Facebook, I don't know if you saw it, but I just had these pictures of within less than 2 weeks, I had grown my own oyster mushrooms at home. And it's pretty cool. So yes, I'm a fan of mushrooms as well. Thank you.
Amazing. And I'm like looking at the time, Amy, we're just like, we have like such a list of questions that we want to ask you guys. Like I feel like we could talk forever and we're not even going to get through all of them. But I think I do have time for one more question, Amy, which is one that I think before we open it up to the Q&A, which is one that we love to ask on this webinar, obviously, because it's an Impact Matters webcast. And so wondering how you guys think about impact, how you define impact, how you think about it, and whether you use any metrics to kind of track your impact. I know, Dihan, you have the awesome little nutritional labels that we posted the other day. So I don't know if you want to kick it off on how you think about that.
Sure, yeah. So because we're sustainability minded, we sort of people, planet, and profit are the 3 pillars that we sort of measure ourselves by. So from a people perspective, job creation is an important thing for us. And to date, we support 10 full-time equivalent people. So that's spent goods team in terms of like marketing and operations. Plus we consider our bakery partner, the staff that work, makes everything, the drivers, et cetera. They're all part of whose jobs we either created and or support as a result of the business that we do today. From a planet perspective, because I may not have mentioned this, but since we're taking organic waste that ends up in landfills, typically ends up in landfills, but we're diverting it. What the reason for why that's sort of planet friendly is when organic waste ends up in landfills, it eventually releases greenhouse gases, one of which is methane. They say that 20% of landfill-based emissions are methane, which is one of the major contributors to climate change. So by us diverting, organic waste from landfills, we're able to reduce the carbon footprint. And not only us, but our end consumers, anybody who purchases products that are upcycled in this way, they are able to do something about climate change on a daily basis. And that's at the end of the day, the reason why we went into food was to sort of give people to empower people to sort of have those choices. So we offer all our stuff at price competitive prices, but our main differentiation against anybody else in this space is the fact that by incorporating upcycled grains, you're able to do something about climate change. And I think that's really resonating well, in addition to the fact that it's made locally.
Yeah, I love that. Shout out Spent Grains or Spent Goods doing the good work, because that's the thing too. Like, I think it's really great that you guys are able to actually help consumers know that by buying this, you might as well take it out of landfill. So that's awesome. So in terms of us, how we think of and track impact, it's kind of interesting since we're project based. So every 16 weeks, we'd be tracking our impact differently. But for these two projects that we're working with, they're both in the CPG space. So meaning consumer packaged goods. So there's a lot of like per unit, if we wash one unit, that means that someone's not buying a new takeout container or a new package. So a lot of our programs right now, our projects, are measuring their impact based on number of packages or number of takeout containers that we're able to reuse. That's probably the most tangible metric. However, similar to what Dihan mentioned for spent goods, we also track, like we talk about social impacts as well. So for example, the other project that we're working on is called Circular. And they are essentially creating local washing capabilities by leveraging underutilized assets. So if we think of COVID-19, how it's completely impacted like the event space, restaurant industry, they all have washing machines that are being completely they're just being sitting there empty. And the jobs that are associated with those industries are being impacted. So what they do is they can also measure their impact by kind of what Dihan mentioned, number of employees or number of people who are now employed because of this sustainability initiative. However, if we talk about if we put the projects to the side and think of the other things that Impact Zero does, we also work to educate consumers about the circular economy, because the more we spread awareness about it, the more people will start to embrace it. So a lot of our impact metrics are on people impacted and the number of people who we've been able to educate on the topic, as well as just individuals that we've been able to connect, because if you can connect two friends, maybe they're going to go and start a business one day, who knows? So building community is equally as important to us as number of containers diverted or things like that, because people are pretty magical when you can get them together.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to ask Sienna just to, maybe since there are 2 or 3 questions I think that are popping up, maybe read them all out, and then you guys, because we want to be mindful of the time, can choose a question that you would like to answer from Sienna's vast selection.
Yeah, great. So the first question we have is from Allegra, and it is for Erin. And Allegra wanted to know, what kinds of challenges did you face and overcome while changing career paths, and how did you overcome them?
There are lots, but I think like the most notable is probably not knowing, like sustainability is just such a big space, right? Like people can do PhDs in like one sliver of sustainability. So I think for me, I felt like I had to fill a lot of knowledge gaps, and I felt like I had to do it very quickly. So when I first started Impact Zero, or even before I started it, I interviewed everybody who would talk to me. I was setting up calls with anybody at CSI. I hosted a consultation to be like, hey, these are the projects I think we might want to work on. Similar to how government does consultations, is like, just come and tell me what you think. And we drew, I think total, I talked to at least 100 people about them. But through that process, over that month or two of just talking to everybody to get their perspectives, I learned a lot, and I got a lot of industry connections. So I have plastics people. I think I met Dihan through that process. Maybe before, I kind of forget.
And Erin, just jumping in, because you said CSI, and for the people that might not know, that is the Center for Social Innovation, right?
Yeah.
Locally here in Toronto, yeah.
Exactly. So they're pretty much, like a group of entrepreneurs, and I'm a member there. So I just blasted an email to that community to say, hey, I'm doing this, who knows things and wants to talk to me. So yeah, just honestly, like I could have done courses. I probably could have, paid someone money to get a certificate in something, but I didn't want to do that and didn't necessarily have the disposable income to do it. So yeah, just talking to everybody to make myself kind of know what's going on a little bit better.
I see another question. Have you considered enlisting design students to help brainstorm ideas? I think it's to either one of you.
I can take it. So we do work with different students and designs to sort of help with various, whether it's branding or ideas. But that's more from a packaging side of how to communicate very succinctly the core ideas. So we have done that, and it's been really helpful.
Yeah, we also work with students all the time. We have a volunteer team of about 16 people on the ops side. So yeah, definitely enlisting a lot of new creative ideas because, there's a lot of passion. So I like to welcome people into our team as much as possible.
That's excellent. Thank you. And I'm going to just ask a closing question, which is, what do you think is special about Toronto that enables both of your businesses to, I feel like you're both thriving in, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if you say that, but I don't see things exactly like that happening where I live, which is outside of New York City. And is it the size of Toronto? Is it the culture? What do you think it is, the special sauce that allows these things to happen?
Dihan, you go first.
Damn. Okay. It's a good question. I don't necessarily know that this is distinct to Toronto, but I would say one of the things about Toronto that's really helped me a lot with my business and just who I am as a person in terms of growing and following my interests has been trying to connect with other people that are like-minded. And just our regular lives can be such where when we're working corporate or regular, jobs, you have that commute. So you don't really, unless you jive and you're really passionate about the work you do, you just kind of do those jobs. At least I did it for getting a paycheck, but finding my people was pretty hard. So one of the things that was pivotal that actually is the Center for Social Innovation, which is this co-working space that was referred to before. It's actually where I'm working out of right now today, where it's just an office building that you can rent the space, whether it's a desk or an office or what have you. But it's just that you meet other people that are like-minded across the board. And the only reason, the criteria to get in is you need to be changing the world in some way. So on one hand, it can be anything. You can be a nonprofit, but it's the idea that you're kind of beyond profit. It's essentially the line in the sand. But as a result, you meet a lot of interesting people that are supportive, and it just sort of encourages you. So Center for Social Innovation also has a location in New York, and I understand there's quite a few, New Yorkers in the present, as well as I think there are 2 locations right now out of Toronto. But it's just that mindset of going to co-working spaces that, or not even co-working, but just places where you find a community of like-minded and that just finding that support. And, where Erin and I and Anela are great examples of how, just through mutual friends or similar interested, we got connected. And, and now we're on this path in a very short period of time. And now we've met Amy. So it's all amazing. So yeah, I'd say it's probably something like that is unique to Toronto. So Erin, over to you.
Yeah, I don't know if anything's like necessarily about like the geographic location necessarily, but maybe the fact that it's kind of like a big / small city. It's big enough to be, to have a good number of people, but it's not so big that you're drowning in an ocean. But yeah, I think it's also about who you intentionally put yourself around, because you can easily feel like you're in a big ocean in Toronto if you're just going to stay kind of hibernated in your comfort zone. So I think it's really about like just putting yourself in situations, meeting the people, and like creating that community for yourself. Because I think people inherently are like want to do good. It's just about creating the space where people can find you and meet you at that level.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think we could keep going, but we always try to wrap these up in about 45 minutes. And I personally still have lots of questions, so I may be sending you some emails. Gosh, this was amazing. So inspiring. And I really feel like, you know, for those of us who may be on the early side of trying to start something new, it just gives me hope and maybe new energy for what's possible. So thank you so much for your time. For anybody who wants to check out their websites, please grab them from the chat. And I also want to thank Anela. It's the first time we co-hosted, and I think it was fun. So maybe we'll have to do this again. And thanks, Sienna, for helping also, because it's the first time you've done that this way. So lots of new things today. We have another episode coming up in June with Maxine Beda, who is the author of a forthcoming book called Unraveled. It's a fantastic book about like behind the scenes in the garment industry. And so you'll have to check out the Impactorum website for the details on that shortly. They're not out yet. And then just check back on YouTube for the recording of this and all the other website webcasts we've done. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you all have an amazing weekend. For those in the States, a long weekend. And we'll see you back here again soon.